Hello, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar. Welcome in. We'll just be taking a couple moments at the beginning here to allow people to join. And if you'd like, please introduce yourself in the chat. We'd love to hear where you're coming from. Thanks for joining us. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome in. Hi, everyone. Hello, good afternoon. Welcome. Just going to allow a couple minutes for people to get settled in, get joined, and I will begin my opening remarks in just a moment. So thank you for joining us this afternoon. Welcome to our webinar. Yes, welcome, Jennifer. Thank you for joining via the chat and talking about the night ADRC. We are really excited to join together these two audiences for this webinar. So thank you so much for the opportunity. Welcome, everyone. All right, so in an effort not to take too much time away from our speaker, I will just start with my opening remarks. So thank you all for being here. Of course, my name is Shelby, and I'm the event coordinator here at Voice. I just have my email down at the bottom of the screen in case anyone ever has any questions about our education programming, which I'll be talking about more in depth in a couple moments here. And so I'd love to hear from you. So of course, we're all here today for our community education webinar on Put Yourself First While Planning the Last Chapter. Really excited to be joined by Dr. Brian Carpenter with Washington University. And excited that you've all decided to join us today. Before I get started talking about Voice's education programming and things, I just want to take a moment to thank our education sponsors. And that's just because their support allows us at Voice to educate and empower individuals and their families for quality living across the continuum of long-term care. So thank you so much to Hammond, Gantner, and Capriano, attorneys at law, Enterprise Bank and Trust, Everspring Pharmacy, the FDC Foundation, Infinium Pharmacy, and Quinn Estate and Elder Law for their support. So just like today's webinar, we have monthly community education webinars available to anyone who is interested for themselves or for a loved one. We have the topic today as well as the upcoming Aging in Place Benefits and Costs. That next one is going to be on December 12th. Like I said, we have these every month, and if you're interested in any topics on the screen and more, you can find out more about that through the link in the chat right now. And all of our past ones, if you've missed any, can be found on our YouTube. And then another aspect of our free education that we provide is the in-person presentations at the St. Louis County Library branches. So our next one is on December 5th at the Lewis and Clark branch, and we will be joined by 360 Quality Care and Transport and Julie Gary from the St. Louis City Department of Health to discuss transportation resources that address social isolation and loneliness for older adults in our community. So we'd love to see you there. It's free and open to anyone. There is a registration, but it's not required, so feel free to just pop in. And then to round out our upcoming education, we have a professional development webinar coming up in February 2024. And the topic centers around older adults and substance use disorders, the growing prevalence of those, and the steps that providers can take to address that. The more information is to come, but you'll want to make sure you're signed up for our newsletter and following us on social media to learn more when it does come out. And next, I just want to take a moment to talk about Project Holiday Cheer. This is a volunteer opportunity for individuals of all ages to impact long-term care residents' lives positively. So getting involved is as simple as signing, creating, or delivering holiday cards to nursing home residents. This simple act of kindness is an immeasurable value. We are seeking help from our awesome community to send holiday cards to 40,000 residents in the greater St. Louis, northeastern Missouri, and Illinois regions. So please check out our website on that and email me if you'd like more information. And without further ado, I'll go ahead and introduce our speaker for today. So Brian Carpenter is the co-director for the Harvey A. Friedman Center for Aging at Washington University in St. Louis, where he is also a professor of psychological and brain sciences. His teaching focuses on aging, mental health as we age, and interdisciplinary geriatric teams. Before we get started, here's just a reminder that you will receive the slides and recording of this presentation within the next 7 days. We will take questions throughout the presentation and at the end, so don't feel shy to pop those into the chat or the Q&A. And please welcome Brian Carpenter to the screen now. I'll stop sharing so he can start.
Thanks, Shelby, and good afternoon, everybody. Good to see you all. And Shelby, can you see my slides okay?
Yes, I can.
All right, great. Well, as Shelby said, please don't be shy about asking questions. You can place your questions in the chat, and Shelby will be doing her best to get my attention, and we'll pause and take questions throughout and at the end. So feel free to chime in. And thank you for joining us today. You know, it's an unusual group of people who are willing to set aside an hour of their afternoon to talk about death and the end of life. So you folks are an unusual group of people right off the bat. And I so appreciate the opportunity to talk with you and share some ideas this afternoon and see if we can put our heads together to make sure that we can improve the quality of life for people throughout their life, but particularly at the end of their life. I want to start out by asking us to think about the other period of life where we spend a lot of time planning. When we have a baby on the way, we do a lot of planning and a lot of preparation. We have a baby shower, we get the baby's room ready, we buy the things that we're going to need, and we do everything that we can to make sure that we're prepared for this important event in our lives. But my question has always been, why don't we do the same degree of planning? Why don't we put the same thought into that other important event in life at the very end when death approaches? Well, for understandable reasons, we have a somewhat uneasy relationship with dying and with death. We don't like to think about it. We don't like to talk about it. And many of us would probably avoid it if we could, although we don't know if it's possible for us to avoid it. But we do the best that we can to try to get around it and skirt the issue and avoid it. We've searched a long time for the fountain of youth, the ability to avoid aging or delay aging and our inevitable mortality. In fact, there are entrepreneurs who are trying to see if we can cheat aging and cheat death in some way. There are several companies, for example, that will take your body soon after death and freeze it in a process called cryonics, with the hope that one day our scientific technology will allow us to unfreeze people, to thaw people, and bring them back to life. We, I think, also demonstrate our discomfort with death by cartoons that you may see in magazines or online that make jokes about the end of life, when really they're trying to make light of something that we feel uncomfortable with. And even if you stop and think about the language that we use in our everyday life, I think you can see hints of our discomfort with death. When somebody has died that we know, we use euphemisms. We have phrases that we use instead of saying the obvious, of saying what really has happened, that a person has died. And instead, we think of these many different creative ways of thinking about describing a person who is dead. And I think part of that use of these kinds of euphemisms is an example of how uncomfortable we feel saying directly that a person is dead or that a person has died. So those are some examples of ways in which I think you can see people's discomfort with death. On the other hand, there are also examples in our culture of ways that people are curious about death and are interested in learning more and thinking more about it and talking more about it. And you can see this even in our public media. There have been several movies that have come out in the last few years that touch on the theme of death or the departed in important ways. People are attracted to television shows that have either an explicit or tangential relationship to death. And even if you look at many of the popular book titles that have been on our bestseller lists over the last few years, many of them talk about the experience of death, the complications around death, what death looks like, how we can be prepared for it. So that signals to me that there is an interest in this topic, and your presence today is another example of that as well. I don't know if you've heard about the Death Cafe movement before, but I think this is another example of how we're seeing changing attitudes in our society about death. There are death cafes in every major city around the United States, including here in the St. Louis region. These are grassroots meetings that are organized by everyday, ordinary citizens who send out a message either on Facebook or some other form of social media to get people together, to gather, to talk about death. There's usually no agenda. These are meetings that happen about once a month in a local coffee shop or some other location that invite people to get together to talk about the end of life in whatever way they're interested. There are death cafes happening every day somewhere around the world and somewhere here in the United States. And I think that's another indication that people are thirsty for knowledge or thirsty for conversation around the end of life. And even here in St. Louis, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but this past October, we had the second annual Last Call End of Life Festival right here in our own Bellefontaine Cemetery and Arboretum that brought together vendors and educators and people who were interested in learning more about death and services and how to be better prepared. So there is an interest in understanding more about death and being better prepared for it. In fact, when you look at surveys that ask people about how important they think it is to talk with other people in their life about end of life, a lot of people know that or feel that it's important to have these kinds of conversations. But there's a bit of a disconnect between what people know and what they do. So even though people will tell you, I know it's important to talk about the end of life with the people around me, but much fewer people have actually done it. And similarly, people will tell you that they know that it's important to do some planning and to put their end of life care preferences and values into writing. But the majority of people haven't taken that step. So that's what we're here to talk about this afternoon. And this is a process that in the healthcare field we refer to as advanced care planning, which is a fancy way of saying getting ready for the end of your life and being able to articulate what's important to you so that at the end of your life, it's more likely that you're going to have an end-of-life experience that's consistent with your wishes and your preferences and desires. So what does advanced care planning look like? What does it involve? It's usually a series of steps that anybody can take at any time in their life, not just when they're facing serious illness or getting close to death themselves. In fact, we recommend that people engage in advanced care planning when they're younger and when they're healthier. so that they have time to think and talk and put their plans into place. Advanced care planning typically has a series of steps associated with it. The first step is thinking about what is important to you at the end of your life. How would you want to be taken care of? What place would you want to be? What kinds of medical care would you want, and what kinds of medical care wouldn't you want? Who would you want to be involved in making those decisions with you or for you if you couldn't make them for yourself? The second step is talking with other people around you so that they know what's important to you, particularly if there ever came a time in your life when you couldn't express your own wishes for how you wanted to be cared for. It's important to identify people in your life who could be your voice, who could tell your healthcare providers what is important to you and how you would want to be taken care of. Step 3 is putting those plans into place, making sure that you have all of the legal documents completed that enable you to express your preferences and designate people to speak for you. If we follow these steps, the hope is that this will lead to a better dying experience, or at least a dying experience that's as best as it can be, that's consistent with what's important to you, a dying experience that's meaningful, and one that's consistent with who you've been as a person over your entire lifespan. So let me give you an example of just one question to mull over and to think about and to talk about with people who are important in your life. And that's a question of what should happen to your body. This is a pretty practical question. Many people have thought about it. Many people have very clear ideas about what they would like to have happen with their body. And it's good to be thinking about this because there are steps that you can take to make sure that after you die, what happens with your body is exactly what you would want to have happen with your body. There are a couple of options that enable you to donate part or all of your body to science or education or medicine. Here in St. Louis, both St. Louis University and Washington University have body donation programs that you can sign up for ahead of time that allow you to donate part or all of your body for medical education or for research purposes. So that's a way of people being able to feel like they're making a contribution to science or education even after they've died. And you can find information about the body donation programs on the websites for either of these universities. What people are interested in doing with their body after they die has changed over time. It used to be that a large proportion of people were buried in a traditional casket, sometimes in a mausoleum, in their whole body is buried. There are different religious beliefs about the extent to which that's important or must be done that way. And in fact, over time, we've seen an increase in alternatives. Cremation, it has become more and more common as a way of disposing of a body after it's died. And most of the people in the funeral industry expect that interest in cremation to continue to grow. But there are other alternatives in addition to cremation. You may have heard, for example, about the green cemetery movement. Ramsey Creek Green Cemetery, where you can see some pictures here on the slide, is the first green cemetery that we think opened several years ago in South Carolina. Green cemeteries allow, depending upon their policies, burials and ashes scattered throughout these parks. But the interments, they have to be natural, dust to dust, as the saying goes. So no toxic embalming fluids, no vaults, only biodegradable shawls or caskets, things that will allow a body to return to the earth. There are other options that are available to people as well. Here's an example of a company called Eternal Reefs that will take your cremated remains and mix them into concrete castings, which they then lower into the ocean off the coasts to encourage marine life. What you see here is a couple of the smallest reefs that are available for purchase. Here's another option Life Gem is a company in the Chicago area that will take carbon from cremated remains, convert it into graphite, and then place that graphite under extreme pressure to create a gemstone. Here's a couple of examples of what those gemstones can look like. So there's another option for what you could do with your body. And this last one, I think, is the most outrageous in my mind. This is a company that will take your cremated remains and launch them into outer space. A couple of different options. You can just have your remains tossed into outer space and let them float around, or there's actually an option to have your cremated remains land on the moon. So that's just an example to let you see that there are a range of options available for people, and a lot of entrepreneurs are making those options available to folks. But I want to pause and rewind a little bit for a moment, because so far I've been talking about what you might want to have done with your body after you die. But it's equally important for us to be thinking about what we want in terms of our care as we're dying, as we're approaching the end of life. So let me talk a little bit about the typical trajectory that happens when a person develops a serious illness. And this can happen at any age in life, not just later life, but an old age, but at any age in life, of course. Usually at the beginning of a serious illness, after a person's diagnosed with a serious illness, that person will seek treatments to restore their functioning or maybe even cure the serious illness that they have. But recently, we've thought about a new way of thinking about cure and care in the context of serious illness. And there's a new medical specialty that's come on the scene in the last 10 to 20 years, and it's called palliative care. Some of you may have heard of palliative care before, but for those of you who haven't, palliative care is a type of special medical service that's available to anyone who has a serious illness. And the purpose of palliative care is to add another layer of support to your other medical treatments and care. And the goal of palliative care is to provide aggressive symptom management to help you cope with not only the physical symptoms that come with serious illness, things like nausea, difficulty breathing, constipation, pain, but also to help patients with serious illness address the psychological, the social, and the spiritual issues that can come along with serious illness as well. Palliative care can be received in the hospital, on an outpatient basis, and even at home, depending upon its availability. And patients will often obtain palliative care right alongside the curative care that they're getting from their other medical specialists. Again, palliative care is an add-on. It's an additional type of service, often paid for by your insurance company, that gives you an additional layer of support as patients move through the serious illness trajectory. Now, over time, if an individual's serious illness progresses and it becomes less clear whether they can be cured, then the shift in palliative care is toward more aggressive symptom management, providing comfort for the person, and they may back off on seeking more aggressive treatments that are designed to cure the person's underlying disease. As disease continues to progress, people have the option of moving into what's called hospice care. Hospice care is a type of palliative care designed for people typically in the last 6 months of life to provide, again, another level of service and support to patients and their family members in the last few weeks and months of life. Once an individual enters hospice, they typically agree to forego or stop any curative treatments, although that's not always the case. And that's in favor of focusing their care on symptoms and psychological and spiritual support. And hospice care continues even after death, where family members of the person who has died are eligible for ongoing bereavement support for up to a year following a person's death. So Shelby, I'm going to stop there and see if any questions have come in.
No questions just yet. Oh, someone just raised their hand. You should be able to. Yeah. I will allow Rachel to talk since she just raised her hand.
Okay. Hi, Rachel. You can go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, sorry, I didn't even realize I raised my hand, but I did have a question.
Cool.
So I was just wondering, do you have I know this would vary a lot per person, but do you have any recommendations for how much someone should save for end of life?
Oh, that's a really good question. Most people at the end of life, well, let me backtrack. So in terms of access to these kinds of services, most insurance companies will help support people's access to palliative care and hospice. And in fact, Medicare provides a hospice benefit at no cost to individuals that will cover the medical care that they need in the last 6 months of their life. Now, what many people don't realize, though, is that hospice means that an additional set of medical providers and support staff come into the home, including providing some basic home health aids. But most of the care that's still provided to people at the end of their life is provided by family members, informal care that the family needs to organize. So there are reasons for people to save at the end for the end of their life if they expect that they may need to hire some paid caregivers to come into the home or to offer support to the person with serious illness. So I can't offer you a particular dollar amount, but there are advantages to having some money put aside, if possible, for end-of-life care if you expect that a person's care needs may extend beyond what might be covered by a typical insurance program or by Medicare.
Thank you, Brian. And that was all there was. There was another comment in the chat from Mr. Mark Applegate about his mom's mixed dementia end stage in her palliative care hospice, and just that it's a great addition to the care team. So we appreciate that comment there.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing your experience. I think that when you talk to people who have had palliative care or hospice care, I mean, in the vast majority of situations, people acknowledge that this was a really helpful additional resource. These are the pros at helping people with serious illness and at the end of life. Our challenge is getting palliative care to people sooner. Often people don't know about palliative care, don't know that it's available to them. Similarly, getting people into hospice earlier rather than later means that we can get people this additional support that can be very, very beneficial, not only to the patient, I might say, but also to the family members and other people around who are helping to take care of the person, because these are wraparound services that are really designed to help everybody in the situation. So thanks for that endorsement, Mark.
We do have another one that raised their hand, and I will find her and allow her to talk if she'd like. Joan.
Oh, it's Joan. Hi, Joan.
Hi, Dr. Carpenter. Two things I wanted to say. Well, actually, one. just so people know that to do your advanced care planning, when you complete your advanced directive, you don't need to go to a lawyer to do that. You can do that on your own.
Thanks, Joan. Yeah, that's a good segue because I'm going to lead us now into a little bit deeper discussion about advanced care planning, what that looks like, and some resources that are available to help them with that process. Thanks, Joan. All right. So thinking about the end of your life or helping somebody else think about the end of their life, one place to start is to ask yourself how you would finish this sentence. What matters to me most at the end of life is ... And I'm going to just pause for a second here and give everyone on the webinar today an opportunity to think about how they would answer that question, how they would finish that sentence. So I'm just going to shut up for a second and ask you all to think. I'm giving you permission to pause, to stop, to reflect. And we don't have a lot of options for that in our day-to-day life. We're all very busy. We've got a lot of things to do. It's hard to stop and to slow down and to give ourselves the time and the space to really reflect and ask what is important to us as we imagine ourselves approaching the end of our life. What would be important? That's where this advanced care planning process needs to start, with people giving themselves permission to slow down and think carefully about what's important to them. And there are several questions that you could ask yourself that would help you think about what's important to you as you approach the end of your life. One of those questions is, where would you want to be? Some people will say very strongly that they want to be at home when they die. It's important for them to be around people that they know, in a familiar environment, in a place that's comfortable for them. Some people will tell you that they definitely want to be at home. And that's where the majority of people will say they want to be when they die, but not everybody. Because there are some people who can see that there are some advantages maybe to being in a facility or some sort of residence at the end of their life. For example, they may not want to die in their own home for fear that their family members who survive them will forever associate those spaces in the home with the person's death. So this is a question for people to ponder, an important question for people to ponder and to think about, and to make some decisions, statements about where they would want to be at the end of their life. Here's another question to mull over. When you are dying, how much information would you like to have? And people have different opinions about this. Some people like to know everything. They want to know all of the details. They want full information. They want to hear the latest updates and all of the specifics associated with what's happening to them and what the doctors are planning and what they expect. But there are other people who are on the other end of the continuum. And they may say, I don't need to know all of that stuff. Just tell me the basics. Just give me the bottom line. So what kind of person are you? How much information would you want about what was happening to you at the end of your life? A related question is, how involved do you want to be in the decisions that need to be made at the end of your life? Some people would want to be really active, autonomous, independent. They want to have a say in everything that happens to them. On the other hand, there are some people who are willing to give up some of that control, who are willing to say, let my family members decide, let the doctors decide what's in my best interest. I trust them. If I'm not able to make decisions for myself, or if they need to make a decision that seems different than what I might have said in the past, then go ahead and let them make that decision. Again, this is a question for you to think about. How involved do you want to be? How important is it for you to have control, for you to have a say, versus giving some of that control up and letting other people take over for you? And another question to think about is, how important is the quality of your life versus the length of your life, or the quantity of your life? Some people may want their medical providers to do everything possible to keep them alive for as long as possible. And other people may have the belief that quality of life is more important than quantity of life. And they want to be comfortable. They want to be able to speak to people that they care about. They want to feel good. And that when the quality of their life has deteriorated past a certain point, then they're willing to forego additional treatments and interventions. So where would you fit on this line? Again, these are some questions that can help people start to think about what's important to them at the end of their life. And once people have started to do this kind of thinking, then they can move on to the stage at which they can complete some of these very important documents. And some of you may already have filled out some of these documents. And there are 3 documents that are important for people to have in place. And as Joan mentioned in her comment, it's not necessary for you to have a lawyer present to finalize all of these documents. You can fill many of them out on your own. And I'm going to be sharing some resources with you at the end of today's presentation to help you locate those resources and fill out these documents. Number 1 is an advance directive, what people used to call a living will. This is a written document that allows you to say what kinds of medical care you would and you wouldn't want if you were unable to make decisions for yourself because of some sort of physical or cognitive limitation. If you couldn't speak for yourself and make your own decisions, what would you want to have done? And the second documents are durable power of attorney. And they are 2 separate documents where you can designate who would you want to make decisions for you if you weren't able to make decisions for yourself. And you can designate those 2 people to make decisions for your healthcare or your financial decisions. They might be the same people, or you might have 2 different people. One who will be making decisions about your healthcare, and one who will be making decisions for you about your finances. Now, those people, they don't have the ability to make decisions for you unless you're unable to make decisions for yourself. So these documents don't go into effect until people aren't able to express their own wishes, but they're good to have in place in case that happens. Why is it important to have these documents in place? Why is it important to have a plan? Well, let me give you one example. You may know Tennessee Williams as one of St. Louis's own famous playwright. When Tennessee Williams got towards the end of his life, he made a will. And this is one of the pieces from his will. He said that I, Tennessee Williams, being in sound mind upon this subject and having declared this wish repeatedly to my close friends, do hereby state my desire to be buried at sea. I wish to be sewn up in a canvas sack and dropped overboard. That was written in Tennessee Williams' will. This is what he wanted to have happen to him after he died. Well, when he died, he was in a hotel in New York City. He choked, and that's what led to his death. Was Tennessee Williams buried at sea according to his wishes? No. Tennessee Williams was buried by his brother right here in St. Louis in the Cavalry Cemetery next to his mother. That was the case even though Tennessee Williams hated St. Louis. Although it's probably more accurate to say that he hated St. Louis because at one point in his life, his brother admitted him against his will to Barnes Hospital for drug and alcohol treatment. Tennessee Williams never forgave his brother for that, and that's why he wanted to be buried at sea rather than back here in St. Louis. So the lesson from Tennessee Williams is make your plans, write things down, but make sure that they will be followed by people in your life. So having these documents filled out allows you to express your wishes, to let other people, including your medical providers, know what's important to you. These documents help you make it clear what you want. In case there's ever a disagreement within your family, they can always go back to this document to see what you said was important to you. And maybe even more importantly, these documents let you choose who can make decisions for you if you can't make decisions for yourself. So these are important documents, but I also want to encourage people to think about a couple of things when they're filling these documents out. So some things to consider. When you are thinking about your preferences, when you are thinking about how you want to be taken care of at the end of your life, it's important to be as specific as you can. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to know about every possible medical situation that you might end up in, that you need to be able to imagine the many, many different scenarios that might unfold as you're dying. But what it does mean is that you should try to avoid using vague language like this. When you're talking to your family members about how you want to be taken care of, when you say something like, I don't want to live like a vegetable, or give me everything, or just let nature take its course, we all know we've heard those kinds of phrases before, but do we really know what they mean? These kinds of statements are not helpful to medical professionals who are trying to make decisions about how to take care of you. Because what living like a vegetable looks like to me might be very different than what living like a vegetable looks like to Shelby. When I say, give me everything, I may have a really different something in mind than when somebody else says, give me everything. Because let me tell you, the doctors can do a lot. Everything is a lot. And they can go to some pretty extreme measures to keep a person alive as long as possible. So when you're talking with your family members or your physician about what's important to you, I encourage people to be more specific. Well, when you say you don't want to live like a vegetable, tell me what that means. What would be a state of living? What would be a quality of life that would be unacceptable to you, that would be a state of living worse than death? And if you can articulate that in as much detail as possible, that will help people understand what's important to you and where to draw the line in terms of the medical care that's offered to you. The second piece of advice I give people is to make sure that you revisit your wishes from time to time. We encourage people to fill out their advanced care planning documents, regardless of their age. Everybody should have these documents in place because you never know when something tragic might befall you or somebody you care about. But having these documents in place isn't enough. When an individual sees other people in their lives who has experienced serious illness, or when they've had conversations with people they care about or trust in their social network, their family members or their friends or their physicians, when they experience changes in their life status, like the death of someone close to them, divorce or separation, or when they experience a significant health change themselves, it's important to go back and think about preferences again, because sometimes preferences change. People's ideas about what they would want and wouldn't want are different based upon new things that they've learned. So advanced care planning isn't a one and done. It's not the kind of thing where you just fill out these documents, maybe have one conversation with people, and then it's over. It's important for people to go back from time to time to make sure that what they stated in those documents is still how they feel today, and make changes if they need to. A third piece of advice that I share with people is to make sure that the people you have designated as your decision makers know you as well as possible. Those people are going to be making decisions for you as if they were speaking in your voice. And the only way that they can do that is if they know what's important to you. Now, these people may know some basics about you. They may know what your favorite foods are or what foods you hate. They may know what your favorite music is and what kind of music you would not want to have played at your bedside when you were dying. They may know whether you would prefer to have a bath or a shower when people are taking care of you at the end of your life. But most people around us don't know our opinions about complicated medical procedures. So it's up to us to learn about these medical situations, to ask our healthcare providers about them, and then think about them and figure out where do we stand on the degree to which we would want to have these kinds of medical interventions. Now, these kinds of questions are not easy. These kinds of conversations are not easy. And people aren't always sure when to bring it up with the people that they care about or what to talk about. So I'm going to share a couple of tips for how you can break the ice. Once you know that talking about end-of-life care preferences is important to you and that you've thought about your preferences, it's good for you to approach the people in your life and say, hey, I'm interested in talking about these things. Now, some people may avoid that because they're afraid it will sound depressing or morbid. And I completely understand that. Talking about death, talking about the end of life is rarely easy. So let me give you a couple of pointers, icebreakers that you might be able to use to help you bring up this topic with people. One way is to refer to somebody else that's died in your family as a jumping off point for starting a conversation about your own end of life or somebody else's end of life. It can also be helpful to refer to stories in the news as a way of saying, hey, I read about this or I heard about this. It got me thinking about how I want to be taken care of, or it got me thinking that I don't really know what's important to you, and I want to know what's important to you so I can make the best decisions possible. So asking people to think about the future, even though there may not be a serious health issue at the moment. Asking people to help you from a position of love and caring and compassion to make sure your plans or their plans are in place. And lastly, if you want to, you can throw me under the bus and you can blame me and you can say that Dr. Carpenter said I was supposed to talk to you about the end of life wishes I have. So it's okay to tell people that your healthcare providers are encouraging these conversations as well. The good news is that there are many resources available to help people do advanced care planning. And here's a list of them. They'll be available in the recording that you'll receive for attending today. AARP, for example, has a very helpful list of documents that you can download in the state where you live. 5 Wishes is an example of an advanced care planning document that leads you through a series of questions to help you clarify your preferences and end-of-life care wishes and who you want to make decisions for you. The Conversation Project has many, many excellent resources in different languages to help people start the conversation about their preferences and wishes. Prepare for Your Care is another organization that has an online resource that helps you fill out your advanced care planning documents. In fact, here at WashU, Prepare for Your Care is part of our electronic medical record. So you can use the Prepare for Your Care website and have your advanced care planning documents automatically sent to your physicians and uploaded to your medical record. Common Practice is a final resource that also has some excellent resources around advanced care planning. So you've taken an important step today by attending this webinar, learning that there are options for you to take control over the last chapter of your life, to make sure that your wishes are known, and to tell people who are important in your life about what's important to you and how they can be involved in making sure that the last chapter of your life is as good as it can be. And Shelby, I'll pause there, see if we can open it up to other conversation and questions.
Yes, definitely. So just the first question in the chat is about the copy of the slides. Yeah, Brian, if you would send me those right after this, I can get those to people. Mm-hmm. And I can also share those with Jennifer in the Knight Alzheimer's Disease Research Center so that she can get it to those attendees as well. And then, so some other things that were in the chat previously that I just want to be sure to address are, they weren't exactly questions, but I think they can be phrased as such, which is the palliative care / hospice. Those need doctor's orders, which can potentially be challenging to get. And you can talk a little more about that, maybe.
Yeah, let me jump in, Shelby. This is, palliative care, as I said, is a relatively new medical specialty, but it's expanded greatly in the last few years. And almost every major medical center, and even now some of our smaller or mid-sized medical centers, have a palliative care team on board. The challenge often is that other medical providers don't know about them. They're not familiar with what kind of resources they can provide or services that they can provide. So often it requires patients or family members to be an advocate and to seek out palliative care. So I'm encouraging people all the time who have serious illness, ask your doctor, can you set me up for a referral to palliative care? And it's unfortunate that we sometimes have to advocate for ourselves, but I think that's an important thing to do. And most physicians will be happy to facilitate those kinds of referrals. I do want to go back, if it's okay, to address a comment that Phyllis made as well about hospice and hospice eligibility. So yes, you're right. You need a doctor to confirm that they expect a person has no more than 6 months to live in order to start in hospice. But people, even if they live longer than 6 months, can renew their hospice eligibility. And it's even possible for some people to go off of hospice when they're doing better, and then go back on hospice later if their condition declines. So there's some flexibility in accessibility to hospice depending upon how the person is doing. In fact, there's some research to suggest that when people get palliative care or get on hospice, that they actually do better because of that additional service. And so doesn't seem to be any way in which getting palliative care or hospice accelerates a person's trajectory towards death. In fact, it typically improves quality of life.
Yeah. And we also have Joan again, who has raised her hand. So I will allow her to talk real quick.
So, Dr. Carpenter, did you say that Prepare for Your Care works with WashU? Meaning, if you go online and use Prepare for Your Care, that it interfaces with WashU's records?
That's right, Joan. So if you go into My Chart, the patient portal,
Oh, okay.
within the WashU system, you can get
Okay.
access to Prepare for Your Care. And then once you've completed those forms, they automatically get uploaded to the patient's electronic medical record.
Okay. Does the paper forms, most advanced directives that I work with have to be notarized in Missouri, have to be notarized in 2 witnesses. So how would that work with Prepare for Your Care through My Chart at BJC? Do you know?
I believe that there's an option for an electronic signature and that they
Okay.
have a system in place to help those documents get notarized within the WashU system. But that's a good question, and I'm not positive of the details. So it would be good to ask either the care manager or somebody in your doctor's office to help facilitate that.
Well, I'm sure that WashU has worked something out that would make it legal.
Yeah. We're trying to make it as easy as possible. Yeah.
Right. This is really great to know. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Now, the other comment I want to make, I know you referred to durable power of attorney for healthcare at the beginning of the presentation. What I have found is depending on where you get the advance directive from, like 5 Wishes or the Missouri Bar or the American Bar or AARP, and even probably Prepare for Your Care, depending on which one you're using, the name may be different. It may not be called a durable power of attorney for healthcare. It might just be called surrogate. It could be called an agent, but it is the same person.
Right. Thanks for making that clear, Joan. Yep.
Yes. Okay. Thanks.
And as you said, and as Doug put in the chat, the Missouri Bar Association has forms that are free and easily downloadable. It is important to use the form in which for the state in which you live, because there are variations from state to state. And I would also echo some of the other comments from people that all too often people get access to palliative care and hospice too late. So the purpose of this kind of educational program is to let people know about these services so that folks can get into these programs earlier in the trajectory of their illness so that they can take full advantage of all the benefits that palliative care and hospice can provide.
There's another comment about the consequences of not having advanced care directives in place in time.
Yeah, Doug, thanks for that comment. So, when people do not have advanced care documents executed, or when they haven't had conversations with people about what's important to them, the default, at least in the American healthcare system, is to do as much as possible. It's a maximalist approach where we try to take full advantage of all the medical technologies and treatments that we have available to keep a person alive. And that's the default because we want to make sure that we give people the opportunity to stay alive if possible. But that default is not always aligned with what people want. Often people, when they learn about some of these interventions like CPR, for example, once you see a video of CPR or learn more about what it involves and the likelihood that it will help restore a person to a certain level of functioning, once people learn about that, they're much less interested in CPR once they see some of the downsides. So the value of having these documents executed is that it lets people know what your wishes are so that you can avoid interventions that you wouldn't want if you're not able to make decisions for yourself.
And outside of that too, we had a recent presentation at one of the libraries about legacy planning 101. And talking about the consequences of not having those things in place for you, maybe financially, legally. I'm going to put that video in the chat in case anyone's interested in seeing that one as well.
Great. Yeah. And lastly, do I have a second, Shelby, to comment on Allison's point about the importance of agreement within families so that everybody knows what your preferences are. Allison, as you probably well know, not everybody within the same family necessarily has the same opinion about these kinds of things. And that's why the proxy or the durable power of attorney is so important, that needs to be a person that you trust to act for you. This is a big responsibility. So you need to make sure that you've talked with the person about what your wishes are and are sure that they are willing to follow through on those. Because in cases of disagreements within families, it's going to be that person who has the legal right to make a final decision.
I just put up that last slide just because I know we hit on time and I want to be mindful of other people's time, but I do also still want to answer people's questions. So we do have one in the Q&A, and then Joan also has her hand raised again too. So if it's okay, I can read you that, or if you want to see that question in the Q&A about if Medicare pays for the expenses of transporting a body to another state.
I do not believe that is true, Carmen, unfortunately. There are some private insurance programs that may have a death benefit that includes transportation, but that would probably varies from policy to policy.
Right, and I will see what Joan has to say.
I just wanted to add that I have read in different articles, one of them that I remember was Dr. Ira Byock, and he refers to when you complete your advance directive, it's actually a gift that you're giving to your family.
I agree 100%, Joan. It's so painful to see families struggling to make healthcare decisions without any knowledge about what their loved one would want. And so having these kinds of conversations with people can be a tremendous gift because it can give them a sense of peace when making these decisions because they know what was important to the individual.
Great. So that looks like that rounds out all of our questions for today. I appreciate you sticking around and answering them. And thank you to all the attendees for all your questions and for being here today. We really love joining with you and having these tough conversations. So as the screen says, there is a survey that will pop up on the screen upon closing. We'd appreciate your input on our education today, and it will inform what we do in the future. So, and then additionally, the recording and slides will be emailed to you within 7 days. And please just check out some other webinars on our YouTube. Thank you so much, Brian.
You're welcome, Shelby. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.